If this is your first or second time here, hope you enjoy the video. If this is your third time here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on when I post. Now I'm doing this video directly after I did the last Monday's video on the Brotherhood of Steel. And between then and now, it's been all of like 15-20 minutes since I finished recording that one. My dishwasher overflowed and I had to spend a good bunch of time cleaning up water because if it's not one thing, it's a million others. Anyway, I'm gonna sit down, focus on some Vault-Tec stuff today. We all know Vault-Tec as the company that made, well, the vaults. And we all know that the vaults were never meant to save anyone. The vast majority of them were experiments in some way, shape, or form. There were a few control vaults which were made to, well, they were control vaults for a reason. Nothing really happened in them. There were even some vaults that were specifically made to help rebuild afterward. Even just that little bit of information we have right there. I say little bit. We're not going to go into the history of each and every individual vault that we know of so far. But with that game plan of some were experiments, some watched the experiments, some didn't have any experiments, and some were meant to rebuild after. With that information, we can see that Vault-Tec wasn't going to let itself end with something as little as the end of the world. They were preparing for something. Now you may be wondering, well, you know, the end of the world can come in a multitude of ways, but a company that sells bunkers, kind of a short life expectancy, well, modern times go to show anything, anyway, that you can't sell bunkers for the end of the world forever. So they were also thinking of ways to diversify what they were going to do. But we'll get into that. But first, we're going to start with the end. When the bombs fell, Vault-Tec disappeared. But if you look closer, you'll see that they didn't really disappear. They moved underground, off the record, and maybe even to some places a little higher up. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Before all of that, Vault-Tec was a contractor for the government. They specialized in building, well, what they're known for, vaults. They built quite a few of these on government contract. They built a few of these on private contract. And they helped the government along the way with a bunch of shady shit. One of the major things Vault-Tec made that isn't really shown quite a bit in-game, which I personally think it should be, is the 1000 series. Now, I do not know if this was Vault-Tec's original idea, and then it just ballooned into the vaults, or if this was something that ran in tandem with the vaults. But the 1000 series shelters were smaller, personal vaults for you and your family. Something that was quicker and easier for them to make. I guess either Vault 15 or Vault 17 from one of the original Fallout games there. Their blueprint shows that it was a 1000 series vault shelter anyway. And this meant that if you had enough money, you could just pay Vault-Tec to build a shelter for you, your own personal vault. And this is most likely also where the DLC for Fallout 4, the Vault-Tec DLC, comes in. Most likely another 1000 series shelter there, but I think it would be interesting to be rooting around through an old mansion or under a huge apartment building that had fancy luxury apartments in it and come across a vault, right? We already know some vaults were for the rich and famous and others were for government officials and whatnot, so of course people would have their own private vaults. Now these 1000 series were remembered and forgotten about, and canonical, non-canonical, and at this point they are pretty much solidified as canon as far as Fallout 76 goes. They brought in instanced places where you could build your camp system anyway, and those are called shelters, which fall in line with the 1000 series shelter that Vault-Tec originally made. And of course, after they made their money using these smaller shelter-style vaults, the government paid them money, and then the whole secret government stuff started going on and all that. They made vaults that were control vaults where nothing was going to happen. Usually long-term isolation is what those vaults were. Other vaults were management-style vaults with, you know, little to nothing going on beyond watching other vaults. Then there were the reconstruction vaults, which were literally given instructions. Hey, you're going to open 10 years after the end of the world. You're given a GEC and you're given everything you need to start rebuilding. Get out there, do it. Or 20 years or 50 years or 100 years after the end. That's how these reconstruction vaults worked. You come from one of these in Fallout 76, which is most definitely a thing. But then there were other vaults, such as Vault Zero. Vault Zero Vault-Zero was a strange thing. It was a facility that actually existed. If you heard me talk about the stuff in the Brotherhood of Steel one of the stuff I referred to as just Raven Rock, you heard me talk about the Cheyenne Mountain facility. It's a giant government facility in the Cheyenne Mountains. Well, Vault-Zero is that complex. Vault-Zero was an expansion upon the Cheyenne Mountain complex. It had cryostasis tubes and Zach's supercomputer, if memory serves me correctly. The people's minds in the cryostasis were hooked up to the supercomputer as like processing units, and you end up with the calculator and the robot army of whatever. Pretty sure one of the non-canonical Fallout games follows Vault-Zero. But it goes to show you that the government and Vault-Tec were working hand in hand by that point in time to create a control vault that was meant to look after all the other vaults. There was another such instance of a vault in California that was a connecting system for the Vault network. I'm guessing this is a, well, I've pointed this out in more than one video on Fallout 4, that the strange radio towers with the satellite dishes on them, what they are, they're a type of relay station that is still in use to this day, if memory serves me correctly. But it's a stationary system of direct broadcast, well, systems that crisscross the country. So if telecommunications, god damn, I need to slow down when I talk sometimes. Think of it like this: a radio station directing its radio signal in only one very small direction, dialed directly in so no one outside of that little area could hear it. You know, like 20 miles, 30 miles, however far down the road it has to be. And then that takes the signal, it amplifies it, it boosts it, and then it shoots it down the line too. That's what these facilities did. And I'm guessing that's what the Vault network did. I doubt it was cables run underground or anything like that. The Vault network, Vault, because it was a vault, was strange in it that they were originally told that they were a control vault, but they weren't a control vault. They had an experiment run on them too. And their experiment was to look after all the other vaults, right? They were pretty much told that every other vault was an experiment, and now you have to watch over those experiments, whilst also being watched over to see what they did. And yeah, that's Vault-Tec, right? And I always wondered why Vault-Tec, of all fucking places, would go through and do this, right? You can't make money after the end of the world because there's no more world left to make money off of. Yeah? Well, I was thinking about it wrong, as I'm guessing many people out there were probably thinking of it wrong as well. Right, especially when you think about some of the other vaults that exist, like Vault 2. Vault 2 was, I do believe it was another cryo facility that held Vault-Tec executives, shareholders, their families and whatnot, and it was hidden somewhere in Texas. Well, why do that unless you're going to wake up one day and everything be fine and you be able to pretty much rule over shit? So you figure, okay, well, Vault-Tec with the reconstruction vaults most likely wants to get civilization back on track, so by the time the higher-ups wake up, everything will be fine and dandy again, right? Cool, cool, cool. That also sounds a lot like what the Enclave's pulling. So maybe the Enclave is working for Vault-Tec in the long run. Or maybe all of these weird experiments and whatnot being done on people throughout all of the vaults, over all of these many, almost like 300 years at this point. Maybe it was to gather a bunch of information for prolonged isolation under different metrics with different groups of people. Like Vault 101, extreme isolation with a small gene pool, right? And then there was another vault that was very isolationist, that had a bunch of different people of a bunch of different religions to see how well they could get along in close quarters. There were vaults to test how well people could deal with cryostasis and the adverse effects thereof. There were vaults that tested the FEV, although I'm probably going with they tested the FEV more in line with the original goals of the Pan Immunity Viron project. There were vaults where equipment was meant to fail so that they could either fix it or figure out how people would get on without it. All of this to me now, especially knowing that the higher-ups pretty much wanted to be able to survive and thrive after the end of the world, brought me to one realization that I think brought everything together, and that's in the beginning of Fallout 4, when you hit the Museum of Freedom to save Preston Garvey and the dumbasses therein. You go through a museum display showing the different wars that the United States has fought, one of which was in the Sea of Tranquility on the moon. If you don't know why it's called the Sea of Tranquility, a long time ago, people thought dark spots on the moon were oceans, so they gave them names like the Sea of Tranquility. Anyway, it means that the United States had boots on the ground on the moon fighting in power armor. Okay, does that mean that they were like fucking airdropped onto the moon to fight, boots on the ground, or does that mean that there were lunar bases? I'm going with there were probably lunar bases, and the only company I know of that wanted to build bases and stuff in moon is Vault-Tec. You can see Vault-Tec among the stars from Nuka World. And if memory serves me correctly, some of the terminals there talk about how they wanted to colonize space, which also sounds like something the Enclave would want to do. So maybe all of these vaults throughout the entirety of all the games, and all of these weird experiments that kind of make no sense when you realize, well, there's no more world afterwards, so why would you want to experiment on what's left of the people? Well, they experimented on the people to see how well they could survive in space, right? A prolonged space trip through cryostasis and any other contingency that they could see popping up due to random happenstance in space. Well, except for the puppet guy. I have no fucking idea what that was supposed to be about. Or Vault, like, what is it, 69, where it's like a bunch, like 999 women and 1 man. Or Vault, like, 68, which is like 999 men and 1 woman. Or a Vault that only took in people over the age of 90. Or a Vault that only took in kids under the age of, like, 16. You know what, there's a lot of vaults that don't really make any fucking sense. But the vast majority of them, when you look at them as through the scope of, think of it as a simulation for prolonged space flight. I can understand that. Now, the major thing that kind of backs this up for me is there's hints here and there that maybe before the end of the world, the United States government may have, after the war on the moon, may have gotten hold of a few asteroids and brought them into a geosynchronous orbit above the Earth so that they can mine them for resources. After all, the resource war kind of showed that, you know, we need resources. And instead of invading more and more people to get them, if we could just pull an asteroid in that's full of copper or nickel or iron and extract them from that, then that should be the way to go. They most likely needed bases on these asteroids. Hell, they probably hollowed out some of these asteroids and made bases in them. They very well could have been trying to develop a type of kinetic weapon. Mind you, we've talked about this type of kinetic weapon for like the last 20 years. Rods from God, or Zeus, or Helios, or Thor's hammer, or whatever you want to call it. Pretty sure Call of Duty Ghosts involves a kinetic weapon of some kind. But, you know, drop rocks out of orbit onto a place you don't like. You don't need to worry about fallout at that point. Could have been something they were trying to figure out and deal with. We'll dip into the show's vaults here for a little bit. Vault 31, 32, and 33, I think they are. One vault. Spoilers for the show here. You can stop now if you want to. But, anyway, cool. If you're still here. One of the vaults is a vault for the higher-ups of Vault-Tec, for that branch of Vault-Tec anyway. They're all held in cryostasis. They wake up every once in a while to find people from the other vaults to procreate with, right? The entire idea of this vault trinity, if you will, is to, well, breed a better human. That's how it's explained in show. It's pretty much a eugenics program to build a more, not docile, but people that will take orders better, whilst the people from cryostasis would be the leaders once and for all, once everything's finished. That's how that's supposed to go, right? Again, it could be the entirety of trying to engineer a new person that's just pretty much a worker bee, so the Vault-Tec could use them when they get wherever they're going in the end game. Another idea of something like this is Vault 112, Tranquility Lane. I always call it Serenity Lane. I don't know why. I just do. I feel like those loungers are some type of stasis or cryo lounger, right? I highly doubt people... Well, House is still alive, so that could be a thing. Although they don't look desiccated like House. Doesn't matter. I feel like it's a type of cryopod that puts people in a virtual reality system. Sure, Braun went crazy, and every couple decades he kills everybody off and starts them all in a new cycle somewhere else. He talks about it in his terminal there. I still don't get how killing everyone off from that cycle, killing everyone off for good, is the good thing to do, right? Think of it like this. Yeah, it's the end of the world. You go into a vault, you get put in a cryo thingy and get to live in a virtual reality system. You don't really know it's a virtual reality system. You just think it's a decontamination thing. And then you wake up in a nice little town. You're told, hey, you know, everything's good. Don't worry about it. We're going to stay here until we get the all clear. You agree, you go about your life, you know, 20, 30, 50 years later. One of your friends accidentally slips and gets impaled on a fence. You know, a bunch of other people die. You eventually die, and you forget all about that and wake up thinking it's literally the day after the end of the world, and now you're in a ski resort somewhere. No memory of having died. Yeah. Then everything's hunky-dory for another 20 years, and then, you know, someone slips on some ice and breaks their neck, and then everyone else gets killed off, you get killed off, you wake up again, and I think the next one that he talked about was like a place in Louisiana. Same thing, don't remember anything, think it's like the day after the bombs fell. Live your life for 20 years, he kills everyone off again, you wake up in Tranquility Lane, you know, a good slice of Americana. You live good for another 20 years, you get killed off again to wake up someplace else not remembering a goddamn thing. Is it kind of fucked up? Yeah, it's kind of fucked up. But if the alternative is going out into a wasteland where people will probably eat you, or super mutants will mutate you into a centaur dog thing, or a floater, or a giant crab shrimp thing will eat you, or giant rats will eat you, or giant cockroaches will eat you, or giant mosquitoes will kill you, or I don't know, you'll just get straight up cancer from drinking the water, or you'll get hit with a radiation storm and get hit with like radioactive lightning, or an overgrown gecko will just come and eat your face, or a cazador could eat you. A lot of things can eat you now, right? I'd take, you know, randomly dying and not remembering it every once in a while compared to that. Yeah, that's just kind of how that goes, in my book at least. Tangent aside, it goes to show you Vault-Tec was going for the long-term sustainability of it all. I'm guessing Braun's section of it was to see the long-term effects of cryogenics mixed with virtual reality to try to keep people lucid and functioning during that time, either as processing systems or simply because they wanted to. Maybe to learn new skills, I don't know. But when you look at a lot of these vaults in the lens of prolonged space travel, you can see what most of them were going for. The biggest thing that I have to take away from all of this is, especially if the Fallout show is actually going with the idea that Vault-Tec started the end of the fucking world. I personally hope that's not the way they go with it, because that would be stupid in my opinion. Just really fucking stupid for forever. Since Fallout was first brought about, China was always the first one to have shot off the nukes that started the end of the world. If fucking Vault-Tec false flagged that shit, then that's just fucking stupid. But it would play into, they didn't just want to survive the apocalypse. They wanted to choose who got to live afterward, right? With their bunkers, their space plans, orbital platforms, if they actually made them. They wanted their own version of the future, like the Enclave. And if all of this is actually true, then Vault-Tec never disappeared. And quite frankly, they never fucking failed. They won. In the end. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if the bases that were used on the moon are still housing Vault-Tec individuals living up in a space colony of some kind. Mind you, there was an orbital station that was supposed to be used in Fallout Van Buren, where your character would go and visit it toward the end of the game, that had to deal with the Enclave, so very well could still be out there, watching, waiting. Maybe they're using the Enclave and supplying the Enclave with resources from these asteroids that they're still mining, so that the Enclave could try to get rid of all the mutations on Earth involving humanity, and get it to a point to where they can come back down and start rebuilding something proper. Anyway, I think I've rambled on for enough. That's like 25 minutes here. So, what do you guys think happened to Vault-Tec? Are they guiding the Enclave, or are they just waiting to return? I'd like to hear your guys' views on it. Anyway, I'm gonna go and make sure my dishwasher didn't overflow again. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one.